Hi, everyone. You're listening to the Blockchain Socials podcast. I'm Josh, and I'm here today with Oisín Kyne, who is the co-founder and CTO of Obol, which is a protocol for distributed validators. If you don't know what that is, we're, of course, going to explain that. Essentially, a kind of quick rundown of what that is personally that I find interesting is because it essentially offers a way for people to come and stake together without being an individual needing the full staked amount of 32 ETH, for example, specifically in the Ethereum network. And so it is a way to kind of share the stake amongst many people while still being able to earn the interest that is generated from proof of stake on Ethereum. But hi, Oisín, how you doing? Welcome.
Good. Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Maybe to start off, if you want to just give like a quick intro to yourself, what got you to starting Obol and where you're coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from Ireland. My parents have run tech companies all of my life, particularly pre-web, Web 1, Web 2 businesses. So I was kind of pretty always in the like web design and dev space. After college, I got a job as a consultant where I was working for the state and got to see kind of how databases were, I don't know, set up behind the hood and stuff. And it was kind of interesting. And then I came across crypto and thought this was this database that no one could modify. It was this kind of, world computer that anyone kind of could use. I got my first job with Consensus in 2018 as a full stack. Did about 2 years there, mostly tokenizing things, particularly kind of early 20s real estate and stuff with the European side. And after getting laid off at the start of COVID, I set myself up as a software contractor and got picked up by a company called Blockdaemon to do ETH2 R&D. ETH2, as we know it now, is kind of proof of stake Ethereum. It's the change from the kind of energy heavy proof of work Ethereum to the relatively more environmentally conscious proof of stake, and ended up building out their system, and it was super successful in the first couple years, ran to quite a large percentage of the network. And along the way, I was struggling with the idea that you couldn't run an Ethereum validator on more than one computer. And this was kind of a bit unorthodox because everything in Web 2, as you might say, from like a database to a load balancer to anything, can run across kind of multiple machines. It's normally known as like high availability. And this wasn't a thing yet for validators. And maybe the end of 2020 around Genesis, I attended a community call organized by the EF and my now co-founder around like what we now know as distributed validator technology. And it was the idea that, hey, because of the curve that Ethereum uses to sign messages, you can have an Ethereum validator be on multiple machines. And this wasn't an accident. This was kind of designed that way. But they just need someone to build the software. And I, at the time, had been trying to make software to tokenize validators as kind of NFTs. But I was failing miserably on the business side to sell anything of it. So I was at the time reaching out to my old boss being like, hey, I built, this software. Have you any interest in helping me like ship it? And he's like, no, not really. And Colin was the only business person I knew in the space particularly. So I reached out to him and was like, hey, I'm trying to build this and I'm failing miserably to sell it. And he was like, oh, super interesting. I'm trying to start this business to build distributed validators, but I don't have a technical co-founder. And after kind of a couple weeks or so, I got convinced, and we started about April 21 building these things. And now it's early February 2024, and we've been on mainnet for about a year. And we have people all over the world running these, distributed validators, which is one Ethereum validator, one kind of 32 ETH or more, being divided across kind of 4 to 10 groups of people. And you need more than 2/3 of them to be online for the thing to be online. So it's kind of the first Ethereum validators with fault tolerant. We can go a bit further from there, but I think that's the background and the intro.
Yeah, for sure. That's helpful. Interesting story. I think just to say for people, I'm also kind of experimenting with Obol at the moment, and right now with a few others, we have our own crew where we are having our own. We started our own distributed validator network on the test nets, so we're kind of doing some experiments there, so that eventually we can go to the main nets once we're ready and familiar with everything on the test nets. But maybe just for people in order to kind of make sure everyone's kind of at the same level, could you kind of quickly recap what is Ethereum staking? Since I know some people are listening, they may kind of know what it is, they may not know exactly the mechanism, and then that'll help build the foundational knowledge for like how Obol works and why it's useful.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ethereum staking is the new quote unquote consensus mechanism for Ethereum, meaning it's the rules for how you add blocks to the chain. Previously in proof of work, you could imagine it as kind of a no holds barred guessing game where people had factories and factories full of machines guessing numbers, trying to get the next block. Whereas how proof of stake
Industrialized
works,
guessing, I think, is a great way to explain proof of work.
yeah, exactly, proof of waste or something. But yeah, on the proof of stake side, the mechanism is you lock up quite a significant amount of money. In Ethereum's case, it's 32 Ether, which is in the region of like $100,000 at the moment. And you, every 6.5 minutes, sign one message saying, this is what I see as the top of the blockchain. And you send it to the network. And if you do that every 6.5 minutes, you get paid a couple percent APR a year. And if you don't do that, you lose about double. And the one extra edge case is if you're caught cheating and trying to say kind of two different things to do to two different people or taking part in something of the sort, you run the risk of having some or all of your 32 Ether that's locked up as stake taken away from you. And that's kind of really the big, I don't know, like underlying risk if you get slashed is what it's called. But generally speaking, yeah, that happens when you do something like run the private keys in two places at the same time, which maybe we'll end up mentioning more as well. Every slashing to date on the network has been from somebody running a full validator in two places, more or less.
Right. Yeah. No, it's essentially I kind of see it as like a consensus mechanism instead of proof instead of industrialized guessing. There is kind of a protocol that randomizes who gets the rights to validate or mine the next block, and based on your state, which is in kind of in multiples of 32 on Ethereum, then that gives you a higher chance of winning the next block. In the same way that in proof of work, the more you mine or the more you guess, the more likelihood you are to get the block. I've heard some people equate this as maybe a useful metaphor for people. Of course, it's not like completely correct, but they kind of refer to this kind of system as essentially an internet bond in many ways. What do you think about that metaphor?
Yeah, I'm pretty in agreement, actually. I think the paper called Ethereum, the Internet Bond, written by my co-founder and Marj Schmid, the CEO of Alluvial. So they modeled Ethereum as a perpetual bond where you lock up and you earn kind of a perpetual like moving APR. I think it's relatively accurate. To be honest, it's a decent way to model them. And I don't know, it certainly got me pretty compelled in Ethereum staking beyond just the technical side when it came out quite a number of years ago, maybe even 2019 or something. 2020, I think.
No. So it's a way, it's like, it's interesting because it's like, you can engage in this kind of, say, financial scheme without necessarily being, I don't know, you don't have to go through what are they, like Charles Schwab or whatever, like these type of things. You can just run your own technical infrastructure at home, for example. And I've been doing solo staking for now, like 2 or 3 years or something like that. I can't remember how long it's been. So yeah, so I've been able to take advantage of that. It's been very interesting being a part of it. But so now that we know and we are reminded again what is proof of stake and how that works, could you explain to us in your own words what is DVT or distributed validator technology and how does Obol work?
Yeah. So one particular validator is usually the term given to 32 Ether, has to sign more or less one message every 6.5 minutes saying kind of, here's my vote on the top of the chain. A couple of times a year, they also kind of get to produce a block. And what a distributed validator is instead of one private key sitting on some computer somewhere signing these messages, you take that private key and you split it into key shares, kind of like a multi-sig. Probably most of your listeners are familiar with kind of a multi-sig where 3 out of 4 people need to sign a message. And you do basically the same thing with these private keys. You split them in a manner so that you only need 3 to 4 to sign anything. Or you can obviously 5 out of 7, 7 out of 10, and so on. And then these pieces of private keys all sit on individual machines. Better yet, these are all different people and not just, one person using 4 different data centers, but to each their own. And distributed validator software is the software that sits in between all of the rest of the quote unquote normal validator stack that enables these to work as groups. So it just comes to consensus on what everyone should agree to sign. And then after they've all signed, it uses the BLS signature scheme to combine them into a normal looking signature to the rest of the network, and it sends it outward. So anyone else on that testnet won't really be able to tell that your distributed validator that you're running with your friends is any different to a normal validator. Except maybe it'll better uptime if I have anything to say about it.
Yeah, definitely. So essentially, as kind of things largely stand, one validator equals one computer. DVT equals many computers equal one validator. And that's how you're able to kind of split the ownership of the unit of stake that you need in order to get going. But also, I think even on top of that, it's a way to perhaps, I don't know, you tell me if I'm wrong, but increase resiliency and security. Perhaps
absolutely.
If you have you could be one person with multiple validators that you split up across different computers, just as a way for increased security if you wanted.
Definitely very important on the resiliency front. And one of the things that happens probably a couple of times a year, I kind of wanted to ask you, how often do you end up running out of disk space or your machine dying? Is your internet reliable? Do you have to go, I've been off for 2 days because my alerts didn't do anything? Or being able to have a machine fail and your validator not go offline maybe isn't the most important on a solo staking level, but especially if you're an enterprise and you have thousands of these things, it's pretty significant. So it also allows them to use commodity servers rather than very fancy ones. A lot of times people favor machines that have dual CPU, dual networking cards, a RAID array of disks. So if anyone fails, and end up having quite expensive hardware. Whereas if you have software-based fault tolerance, you can have pretty bog standard commodity hardware instead. And you're also a bit more protected on client failure type of things. We've seen a couple wobbles from clients over the last while. If you want to be risk averse, you would have a Teku, a Lighthouse, a Nimbus, a Prism. You'd have kind of a variety of all of them on the different machines. And if any run into a snag, if it's less than a quarter or less than 2/3 or 1/3, you'd stay online.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've definitely had I've learned a lot about how to host a node simply because I have my own stake involved in everything. I haven't had too big of issues, but I have had a couple of smacking my head against the wall trying to figure out what's going on exactly and learning how to read error logs and such like that. And then sometimes realizing oh, it's not even my Ethernet cable accidentally disconnected and that was a problem the entire time or something like that. It's not too big of it. I mean, for me, it's I think for some people you can really freak out if your validator isn't connected, but in reality, I've been once you do it for long enough, you're oh, it's disconnected. You didn't really lose all that much. It's pretty minimal.
Yeah, a couple bucks a day type of thing. It's oh, this is inconvenient.
Yeah, it's mostly inconvenience to try to figure out. But usually, I mean, at least for mainnet staking, there's so many resources to try and figure out kind of what's going on, which helps a lot. So I mean, for me, it's been part of for me doing it in the beginning was I wanted the experience and to have to force myself to learn about this stuff a lot more, which has been nice.
Yeah, for sure. Go on.
No, I was just gonna say that. And then I think it's important to support solo staking for the decentralization of the Ethereum network if we actually want it to be decentralized and we gotta walk the walk.
In that regard, that's one of the things that I think is kind of niche, and you brought it up almost immediately in the like intro about DVT and why it's cool is that 32 ETH is basically prohibitive for anyone getting into the space. The vast majority of people that can solo stake were into Ethereum, back when you could. And it's kind of a problem and something I think we kind of need to solve if we do want solo staking to continue. Is you can't kind of have it both ways. And that's where I think distributed validators are super exciting, because there are a lot of people that would delegate to distributed validators or to home stakers if it was kind of safe and like kind of not risky to do so. But because of certain designs that we're kind of fixing in the chain, like kind of forced exits, there's a lot of trust you have to put in the person that runs your node. So people kind of favor much more maybe centralized entities. But we've done some initiatives with people like EtherFi where they set up clusters of about 10 home stakers. They just kind of sent them a box, said, here you go, all over the world. And now each of them can all make a couple of dollars a month for like operating like EtherFi's pools stake. And that's something that I get kind of really hopeful about when it comes to the distributed validator side, is that there's a lot of people that have the technical capacity, have the interest, or into Ethereum, they can, run, Minecraft servers or whatever. But they look at this and even Rocket Pool is 20 something grand in like stake, and even that's the 80, there's maybe some down to 2 ETH, which is still 6K. So I'm pretty hopeful that with distributed validators, you can put people in as like 1/7 or 1/10 of the thing, and it's like, cool. Stay online, hopefully keep it up, and we have these like splitter contracts that allows people to get paid like a fixed percent of the rewards and stuff. So that's kind of how I don't know, really hope to 10x the amount of home stakers in the network.
Yeah, I think this automatic goes very well into my next question, which is going to be like, what are the big unlocks that distributed validators bring to Ethereum? And I think this is kind of like, for me, there's this tension with the desire for the price of Ether to go up and for decentralization, which is very, I think it's never going, that tension is not going to go anywhere. And so, yeah, even, Rocket Pool was this idea. I don't know where exactly they are now because I don't really use it, but you can do half of the stake or maybe a quarter. I don't remember how far down they go.
It's down to a quarter, and I think they're working on more. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like if the price of Ether keeps going up, then you have to keep splitting, offering a new service of like lower, just to make it available for people to take part in this. And I guess there is not wanting to rely on kind of, still somewhat centralized entities to be able to run these types of things, but allowing people to simply do it for themselves, which is why I think it's important to have this kind of protocol to do it. And then of course you have Cosmos, you could say, and a lot of the IBC chains have been doing something similar where they have delegated proof of stake, but it's still, you are delegating to a centralized entity to hold your stake, and they take a cut and you take, your portion. So the idea is like, can we do that without needing the delegated institution to run it?
Exactly. That's something that I'm pretty hopeful we can achieve in the next while. We've had quite a few promising other kind of, we normally refer to as squad staking, where it's like kind of you and I favor picking people that have a kind of a group of friends or a bit of community. Picking kind of strangers on the internet is kind of a bit harder because they don't necessarily want to help each other out as much as people that'll kind of, so long as you have one or two very technical people in the squad, the rest of them will kind of figure it out. But we've had squads set up in like Eat Mexico. They did kind of 3 on Holski to try and get running. We were doing some with SheFi, that are kind of a women in crypto group, getting them to train each other and like set up squads, and Eat Staker, and a lot of these kind of different communities are setting up these kind of squad staking clusters. And the hope is, for now, and we can talk maybe a bit about roadmap and release, we've kept things kind of sane and try to keep it limited. So we're in beta and we've capped everyone at 1 validator. But as this becomes more battle tested, mature, we're more willing to let people kind of take risk with the software and not kind of get it over their heads. We can let that come up and let people kind of do more delegated staking or something of the sort.
Yeah. I think, I think for me, it's just like interesting to think of using the internet for, I mean, you can make friends over the internet. Like anybody can make friends over the internet and have like their own little online community, online group. But then it's another thing whenever you are doing economic activity together, like, I mean, like techno economic activity together, at least we're talking about if you have like a distributed validator squad with you, um, it gives you an opportunity to kind of have a longer term potential relationship with people over the, but even like this also applies locally as well. I mean, having your own group of, your own squad in your perhaps local community that is doing distributed validating, and then you're using kind of like the yield of the internet bond that you all have staked in Ethereum as perhaps a way to together figure out what you want to do with that yield. So I think there's like, it opens up this kind of thing where you can you can choose to do kind of like treat it as a business where we're all going to take our percentage cut, or you can extend that if you want to where you want to have some sort of governance around what you're going to do with the yield to fund this or that initiative in your community, whether that's a local one or an online one. And so that's what I find really interesting, and something that I think, I don't know, I think in the on the political side, there's kind of like a need to embody, collectivity, and having this technical infrastructure and Primavera likes to use the word scaffolding for like just being able to get on top of, and then now you can like take part in the organization. I think is like a super interesting thing and super interesting development.
Yeah, I'm super aligned, and we'll hopefully be able to communicate more of that in the coming months around what we hope to do in that regard. But I will say that my like Telegram handle name is like liberal radicalism, from the original paper by Vitalik, Zoe, and Glenn Weil around like what we know as kind of quadratic funding and matching pools and stuff. I think matching pools will be like a fascinating thing to bring into this, internet bond equation, and what's hopefully going to happen over the next decade.
Mm-hmm. And then I don't know if this is like a good time to perhaps mention this, because there are also like a lot of changes happening in the Ethereum world as far as like EIPs. I think I believe it's an EIP that you mentioned before we got on the call about the Ether issuance curve and that change that's being proposed. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So I think what's kind of one of the things that people deep within the niche of Ethereum in the staking world is this concern around whether or not people will hold pure Ether, or whether people will end up holding ST Ether, liquid staking tokens, these things that kind of expose you to the reward of staking, but doing nothing other than holding a token. And some of the arguments are we should change the reward curve, the issuance curve, the APR that you get from the bond, to go negative, or at least to go below real yield. So you might getting nominally zero, but a real yield of negative. And in the interest that this might favor Ether, but disfavor the liquid staking tokens. And the kind of contention from the community and stuff, and I think there's quite a lot of people interested from quite a lot of the different kind of people with skin in the game, you might say, is there's already a massive bias towards economies of scale. And if you already have kind of a huge amount of Ether sitting there, you may delegate it anyways. And the idea is that the marginal validator is the most decentralized one, is how someone said it, put. And if you change the issuance curve or kind of quarter it or something of the sort to kind of achieve it being financially non-viable for more than X amount of people to do it, what you end up doing is people that are running it are the ones that can run it as a loss leader, the ones that maybe just want for other things. People will seek yield from eigenlayer and potentially kind of rehypothecating their stake, being more dependent on MEV, centralizing because the MEV isn't uniformly distributed. It goes to kind of like a power law. So I think while I totally understand where they're coming from in terms of making ETH be the money, not the ST ETH or the equivalent, I'm not 100% sure that cutting the rate is what gets you there. My perspective, to be honest, would be to up the kind of correlation penalties, particularly with like liveness. And I think that would do one thing. And then the other one is around risk you can take in solo stakers and the liquidity preferences you can offer people that are native staking, where they're not kind of exchanging it for like a liquid staking token. This is getting like a little in the weeds, but on the exit side of things, one of the big fears you probably doesn't bother you in the slightest because you're kind of bought in is how long the exit queue could be. Almost always it's 27 hours, but if there was a bank run, it could go to months for all it matters. And this is a concern for people that are maybe, like, oh, I want to stake, but if I want to, have my money back, I shouldn't really be told, sorry, everyone also wanted their money back, so I'll get it to you next week. And then they kind of end up holding something like a liquid staking token because they're like, okay, I can liquidate that. And also they hold the most liquid one because that's the one that they can most liquidate. So one of the EIPs, as you alluded to, that's coming up, that's not the issuance curve proposal, is related to exits. And one of the things about taking a risk on solo stakers that I alluded to is because the proof of stake chain began independently from the Ethereum like proof of work chain, and they eventually merged it over, there was never a way for the exit address, the kind of address where the withdrawal stuff goes, to tell the proof of stake chain to exit a validator. It's all driven on the proof of stake side with the proof of stake key, the hot key. So if you delegate to somebody, they can just turn off their machine and you can't get your money back. You just have to sit there and do nothing and like kind of get mad. And that's one of the big problems that they intend to address in the next hard fork that's probably going to be at the end of the year. It's called forced exits or withdrawal address initiated exits. And the tweak that I would like to do instead of changing the issuance curve is to allow people to pay a fee, an escalating base fee, very like EIP 1559, to have their ether back at like finality, 12 minutes after the end of the block, and have this be a very small trickle, like really nothing on the grand scheme of things, but it would end up allowing people to say, oh, I can have my money back for, this price. And if you set it with a pre-escalating base fee, you'll always get the trickle and you'll see where it balances out at. But this would, I think, allow people that don't want a native stake to native stake. Another thing I have mentioned is, like correlation penalties. People should get pretty heavy. It shouldn't matter if you're like a solo staker and you go offline, but if the network goes, at the moment, it goes past 33% offline, the penalties get extremely severe. But I would kick that in from like 10%. If you lose more than 10% of the network, people should have kind of months of lost earnings. And that won't bother yourself or myself or someone who's a solo staker, because hopefully we'll fail for, just our hardware or whatever. But if someone's running something, in a manner that's 10% of the rest of the network, they should like see a bit of like a pain. And that would be a thing that would, decentralize the liquid staking protocols. People would be like, oh, I don't want to like lose a lot of reward, so I better pick something that won't go offline in a correlated manner. And better yet, you can favor like native staking. And also this idea of liquidity finality helps a small liquid staking token. If you've only kind of a 10 or 50 million market cap and some whale wants to buy a load, they're like, I can't like, buy enough of this. It's kind of a very liquid project. But if they can exit validators pretty immediately, it's like, cool, I can have $5 million worth of this $50 million project because I can withdraw them all pretty like straightforwardly with the exit sheet. But yeah, this has been a little bit of a detour and a rant into the technical weeds of staking. But
maybe I can try to.
I think issuance curve is maybe not the right way to disfavor a liquid stake call.
Okay, I see. So like one kind of if I'm understanding correctly, there are people in the Ethereum community that are proposing decreasing the yield that a staker can get as a way to disincentivize essentially businesses, that if you are a for-profit like larger entity, you wouldn't be able to necessarily continue your business at such a scale because you're not earning enough interest. So it disincentivizes that. And if you are someone who is a solo staker, or you are just heavily bought into decentralization of Ethereum, you're going to keep going anyways. But you're saying that this might not be the best idea. Instead, you could like add a fee to to speed up your exit from proof of stake, so that you can withdraw your tokens a bit faster.
Yeah, that to favor staking like directly in native staking, and not to be like for the risk averse delegator to hold like a liquid staking token. And then on the APR side, it would be, I would rather just more heavily penalize correlated offline than I would be take the overall rate down, because yes, there are some diehards that will stake a lot of money for negative APR, but not enough to run a network.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I see. So like, because the way that people kind of compensate for this is by having liquid staking tokens, so that they can more liquidly move in and out of a position, and instead allow faster movement of position natively on Ethereum, so that you're more likely or willing to engage in staking and solo staking.
Yeah, for sure. And you're not likely to kind of rehab the stake for a bit of yield.
Yeah. I think the big thing for me is that distributed validators kind of bring, and I think kind of what you're suggesting is that essentially we want to, at least, I mean, I feel very strongly, we should reduce the power of centralized liquid staking protocols and applications, as this is a huge centralization risk for Ethereum, that if, Lido, I think, is the biggest one. If they go down, then it's like, that's a huge event if that happens, which is why there's all this discussion about client diversity and all these things that perhaps maybe we won't go into there, but I suggest people kind of look into that if they have the time. So I think it really explains there's like a lot of politics in, like, this is like a really, really explicitly political technological space, even though people maybe don't like to look at it that way. And there isn't necessarily clear, like, I don't know, it's not like there's a clear left wing and right wing camp per se, but maybe there is perhaps like people who want to make as much money as possible, and people who like care about the long-term stability of the network. Maybe those could be like two camps.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I was going to say pro-business and anti-business or something.
But are there any other maybe things that you're hoping people build with distributed validator networks, like using Obol? Is there anything?
Well, the one you hit the nail on the head with is the kind of public goods funding, but also the kind of, I particularly like the kind of quadratic aspect and stuff. So there's a project called Octant, which came out of Golem. They were kind of a 2017 maybe era ICO, and Octant has quite a large amount of ETH from then. And what they've done is so far they built it themselves in their solo staking. I don't know exactly, quite an amount. I think they kind of have given out $1 million in staking rewards to projects, and they have a quadratic funding UI to kind of do so. So we're pretty big fans of the Octant team, and are trying to convince them to also delegate to some squad to do this, rather than only just do it solo. So I think, give it a bit of time, but I think we'll get there and give that a try. So I'm really excited to have, we talked with a major hospital in the US once, and they were trying to figure it out, and someone came up with the idea of calling it a perpetual endowment, that you kind of lock your ETH and you point it at a funnel and you say, those voters allocate this money, but the money just sits there, it's still Ether. It'll still probably do all right over, decades. And that'd be a very novel way to direct the flow of staking rewards.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think I don't know. I have a project called Bren Cooperative, and kind of the first idea that I had of kind of what we wanted to build as far as like crypto applications from a post-capitalist lens was essentially what now I kind of see as being kind of DVT based things, and this kind of like perpetual endowment idea is like another way of phrasing it. We phrased it as crowd staking, where everyone just kind of like brings their stake together, and then we generate yield, and then we govern together what we want to do with it. It's kind of you can think of it as public goods funding or whatever. But essentially as a way to fund ourselves to go and do cool shit. And no, I think it's but I've kind of like naively in the beginning thought like, oh, we can do this with Ethereum staking. That can't be that hard. And then I was like, oh wait, no, it is way more difficult than I realized. This is why we kind of switched to this more. I mean, our model is more like a local currency where you're staking DAI instead, or XDAI. So
We're nearly there. I'm happy to show you what should be left to do on top of Obol stuff, but yeah, I think we have the smart contract set up for that if you want to give it a try next.
yeah, sure. Yeah, so I think that was really interesting. Maybe one thing for people who are listening, is there any way for them to begin finding a crew for their own distributed validator network?
Yeah, it's a good question and something we've been trying to figure out how to scale. Right now, what's worked the best is when you have some sort of kind of existing community and a bit of trust versus saying, oh, I'm not in any communities. I'll show up in the Discord and hope somebody will kind of pick me up. So we've been pretty active with the existing kind of Ethereum based communities, trying to be like, hey, have you guys heard of squad staking? You should check it out. Is there, 20 of you that'll come to a workshop day where you'll see a little demo, do the kind of key creation process and learn a bit about it? Can you end up with 7 of those making it on to give it a try and testing it? How many of those will commit to the slightly elevated kind of hardware requirements you need for this machine? They'll get cheaper as they go along, but it's still, sometimes, not non-trivial. And then can you get them onto mainnet? And then can you maybe get them delegated stake? But at the very least, if you go to obol.tech and join our Discord, there's a pretty active communities for many different languages as well. And you can kind of get chatting, start to contribute, try and run things for the docs. You can run them all solo on your own machine. But if your machine dies, that's, you've every copy on one. And you can give that a try run on Holski. But one of the things we're working towards is a kind of a credentialing program where you get a credential if you can kind of complete a knowledge quiz, if you've run a validator on testnet and stuff. So you guys would hopefully be eligible for a technical credential. And that'll eventually show on your kind of profile. And hopefully you can also say, was a member of like the Lido community staking module, was a member of kind of EtherFi one, was in that squad, and build up a little bit of reputation to actually get a bit more stake or kind of something of the sort. But yeah, like flat out, I would say start in the Discord, make friends, but it can be a little tricky. It's one of the things we haven't done is we deliberately didn't do something totally permissionless. We match you and we find your counterparties because that's a bit scary to do and, vulnerable to kind of Sybils and stuff. We figure that it's much safer to let people use the social layer to get started with kind of these distributed validators rather than trying to protocolize it from the off and not mess it up. So yeah, relying on communities and squads and layer 0 to figure out kind of complexities of running stake with other people semi-voluntarily.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still like I still have not been convinced that it is possible to kind of protocolize this type of stuff yet. Like it seems to me like really, you just got to be friends with people. You got to make friends, man. Like find a community of people and like build relationships. You got to do, and maybe, get out of your shell. Don't be so shy. Make some friends and get excited about, who are excited about these things and start working together. I think that's kind of like the best way to do it. I was lucky enough to have like, a couple of friends that I knew personally who wanted to do it. And then they had friends of friends of friends. So then we had enough people for our own squad to run our own distributed validator. But as well, I mean, I could imagine doing that just within my own, like the crypto leftist community and Discord server and trying to find people there.
Start a little project like CrowdStake and see who'd be interested in getting involved.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, if you don't have that, you can always go to the Obol channel. I saw that you guys have to find people.
Exactly.
For maybe one of the last questions, I think it would be interesting to talk about the roadmap, because you recently published a very nice looking kind of Vitalik copied roadmap graphic that is really kind of shows what are the different work streams that Obol is working on. Sometimes I get, like, when people ask me for a roadmap for Breadchain, for example, I find it sometimes daunting. I'm thinking, it's like, ah, fuck, we have so many things to do. How can I can't promise. I don't want to promise anything, because then you're afraid you're going to, you set yourself on these like kind of expectations. But I think what, using this style of graphic that you have, that also Vitalik did, is you kind of show each work stream separately, give it a funny name, and so that you can kind of like, you know, bring together or just like conglomerate a few different things into one, so that you can show what are the kind of like end games of different aspects of at least of Obol, what you've done. So yeah, maybe
Yeah,
you want to, can we go through that and talk about what that changes?
absolutely. I certainly empathize with the roadmap comment. It's just been 3 years at Obol, and it's probably the first roadmap I've ever made. Um, so that was interesting. What kind of came back to, or something that I found super encouraging way back when, is Vitalik posted his first one, I want to say very close to the genesis, maybe in the few months afterwards. And he had distributed validators on his roadmap, and we kind of never interacted with them, and had only kind of recently changed the name a little towards distributed validators to make them kind of more comprehensible. And that was super encouraging to see. They were like marked as distributed validator demo nearly finished, distributed validator implementation kind of only started. And then he had it further on his second one, and then the third one most recently in January. He had distributed validators like complete. And I was like, oh, I appreciate the signaling, Vitalik. Your word has a lot of, clout. But at the same time, I was like, there is, so much like left to do. So I decided to basically do the same thing, came up with, the different sections to agonize over, try and make them with urges in the name, give up, and then pick something that I have emojis for. And laid it out in kind of a different like sections and stuff, put a blog post to go with it. But so far it's only been out maybe 24 hours, but it's been getting pretty good reception. But the summary for your listeners are that one of the big differences is we built Obol in a bit of a minimum viable product type, where I've tried very hard to keep it simple. And one of the main places where it simplifies is it's a fixed set of people and settings when you set up the cluster. And if you don't like it, spin it down and create a fresh one. And I think that's much safer. One of the main reasons is for kind of operator rotation. It'd be nice to kind of kick out an underperformer, but it's some complicated math and it's kind of scary, and it brings in kind of weird incentives if you have it like be like a performance based kind of change. And then there's even the problems of doing it with untrusted people, giving them keys and whatnot. So it was like, to hell with it. People want distributed validators more than they want the reward and punishment scheme to go with it and whatnot. So it was like, give them that, let them kind of use it in the communities, let them kind of use it for their own cases. And what we refer to, taking a leaf out of Ethereum's book, is like Obol 2.0. And the main difference is it would be like editable clusters or mutable clusters. So you can add more keys, you can update the MEV or the fee recipient address to go somewhere new. You can change operators in a scary way. And generally, that's kind of, they're all the wish list items of editable clusters. And that's what we kind of partitioned out into the kind of like a future iteration, and like, ship something simple first. And wider than that, it also comes with the idea of wanting to be a bit more decentralized, have a spec, have a couple independent client teams to give people the reassurance that even if Obol disappears in the morning, that there's 3 more teams with clients in production. So, that piece of the stack is also risk reduced. So I didn't want to we tried it back with the EF building spec first, kind of team second. And I was like, no, you kind of have to build one before you build a spec for something else, and then you build that instead. And that's kind of the route we're going. So we have something that's more or less approaching V1.0, maybe by the time this is out. And we can say, yeah, these are immutable, these are simple, they don't have built-in economics and stuff, just kind of use them as you so choose. And then the fancy editable one is the one that, I'm currently already working on, obviously, for a good year or so, and it'll probably be a few more years out. It's kind of the thing of Uni V3 started before Uni V2 shipped.
Right. Yeah, so basically for people maybe to understand is that when you make an Obol cluster now, so when you make a network with your friends, you have to set the number of people, and that is the minimum is 5. I want to say
4.
3, 4. So you do 4 up to 10, and
and it could go higher, but yeah,
right.
10 seems like a lot.
So it's kind of like right now it's kind of you guys have designed it within certain parameters to keep things fairly simple as a minimum viable product, and then in the future we'll expand that to where you can edit the people who are in there. So let's say you have 10 of your friends, one of your friends is a big dick now, you guys can kick him out. Maybe you're down to 9, or you find another friend to replace him, so you can edit the other validators, the other friends that are taking part in your network. At the moment you can't do that, you just kind of set as it is, but that's what's coming down in the roadmap. So then I think more and more it's going to become interesting, like this technical governance, how it, people are going to actually have to do that who are being part of these like DVT networks.
Yeah, 100%.
I think it'd be interesting.
I've only been worried about the hockey, let alone the flow of funds.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to me, it's like, one of the things that I find interesting is that, like, I think in normal life, we don't really have similar things like this, or often it's not like the average unless you're really a part of your community and you're really like, it takes quite a bit of effort. But it forces perhaps kind of like small time degens if they're using DVT to like begin doing the somewhat harder work of like socially coordinating with their friends or acquaintances over the internet or in their communities, to where you have to come to conflict resolution perhaps, and help each other out, and have some sort of system of mutual support that otherwise we're all just like individuals who are sailing the seas on our own to find a treasure or something.
For sure. We used to call them co-ops before David Hoffman gave them the more catchy name of squad staking. But yeah, I do think of them as kind of cooperatives. And how long can you say like, God, this guy never updates his node, or it's been like 3 months, let's do we kick him out, what do we do now, do we exit the whole thing because of him? Yeah, it'll I don't know, form bonds, and I don't know, frustrate people as well. I'm sure someone will have a falling out over it someday, but yeah, it's as I kind of alluded to, I wrote maybe a blog when we started Obol, and it was like, I think sharing stake is one of the most credibly neutral ways to run the validator. If you have total control, you can kind of go and change whatever you want. But if you have to kind of negotiate with 7 to 10 people being like, hey, I think we should turn such a setting on, like kind of sandwiching on the MEV side, or to do that on or off, and things like that, it's I don't know, interesting. I think you'll get a better kind of more centrist outcome if you have a group of people in a small group picking kind of actions rather than people individually being like, yeah, more yield, click the button.
Right. Are there any other things you want to mention that's on the roadmap?
The other aspect that I'm also quite interested in is more on the Ethereum in the lab section, is around Verkle trees. Verkle trees will hopefully be one of the next big upgrades. Not quite at the end of this year, but everyone's kind of agreed that 4844, which is kind of blob space, was a big one, and then Verkle trees is a next kind of main target. The reason being is it would massively, if not nearly completely, reduce the need for historical state to store that. So you could reduce your disk requirements for a node a huge amount. I don't want to kind of overpromise, but I think at least down to kind of something in the region of like 400 gigs at current sizes, whereas mainnet right now is 1.2 terabytes. And getting it kind of that much lower and well under a terabyte for a significant amount of time would be quite a nice one. We've been working away with Ethereum on ARM, trying to make it easy to run these validators on a Raspberry Pi plus like a solid state drive, or DApp nodes are quite popular to get things out there. And yeah, that between that and forced exits and maybe even max effective balance, all of these things will come down to making it easy to run a validator on a small amount of cheap hardware. Because if we do really want to have, more than 710, there is more hardware involved, there is more effort. So you do want it to be as cheap as you can kind of make it to be involved. And I hope with those, we will see a plethora of, hey, it's, $500 to make a staking machine. Here, it's 2,500 for the whole cluster. You can kind of sponsor it and get quite a lot more and quite a lot further places. So that's probably the last one that, I don't know, immediately comes to mind.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on and for explaining distributed validators to me and to the audience. Maybe just the last question, if you want to leave where people can keep up with you and Obol.
Absolutely. So we're at Obol Network on Twitter, OBOL. And you can get me on at Oisín Kyne, OISINKYNE. Our website is obol.tech. From there, you can get to the docs. I'd recommend checking out the Launchpad, which is the interface for creating validators. This will be getting a bit more easy to navigate and stuff in the coming weeks. I'm pretty hyped to get it out. I don't know if you've seen your cluster status page, but that's probably the main place to get in touch with us. And I think we're on Firecaster on Obol Network as well. And yeah, I'm trying to get into that side of things. So yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Find your squad and start figuring out how you can start squad staking. Catch you later.
Yeah.